Listen, you hear that? Sniffing? You're not going to hear that on your network. But we use sniffing as pen testers. And also, bad guys use sniffing as well. So let's talk about that. Our goals for this module are that you will understand sniffing, MAC attacks, DHCP attacks, computer worms, ARP poisoning, MAC spoofing attacks, DNS poisoning. You'll learn the sniffing tools and the countermeasures. You'll understand sniffing detection techniques and sniffing penetration testing. So what we're going to talk about is sniffing concepts and DHCP attacks and MAC attacks and ARP poisoning and DNS poisoning, sniffing tools and countermeasures, detection techniques, and using it in pen testing. Let's start with concepts. Sniffing is all about putting some kind of monitor on your network and capturing traffic. And hopefully you capture it in a way that nobody notices. So you're capturing data packets moving through a network. It's a form of wiretapping, but specifically for a network. How can you do this? Well, you can plug into an unused switch port. Lots of organizations have switches that are in different rooms and they've got ports that are open, or you connect to a wireless access point. If you're in the same location, you could plug in using an Ethernet cable. So let's talk about sniffing. You cannot go sniffing something that is not on the same network segment as you. So we can't sit here in the US and sniff things that are going on in China and vice versa. If we want to spy on them, it's the whole spy movie thing of you have to plant the bug in the lampshade right where the people are talking. If we could manage to compromise a machine in that location and capture all the traffic on that machine and send it to us, that's different. But the sniffer is still local to that traffic. Now, can you put it on a switch? Can you put it on a hub? Can you put it on an access point? We'll get to that. So what can we gather from sniffing? Well, anything that goes across the wire. Syslog traffic, DNS, passwords like telnet, email, SMTP, POP, IMAP, FTP. You can capture logins, and if the passwords aren't too tough, you can crack them. You can capture whole files. You can capture email and read it. You can capture configuration files like router config files, web traffic, FTP traffic, including passwords, chat sessions, VoIP sessions. I mean, if it's going on the network and it's not encrypted, or if it's not strongly encrypted, it's yours. So sniffing is the monitoring and intercepting of data flowing through a network. You can use it to identify all the devices and the addresses and the protocols that are using the network. Most of those protocols are clear text, the old ones, and we can use them to just extract credentials, capture files and images, read messages, steal data. Some sniffers can recreate whole TCP sessions, Wireshark, for example. So here are different people doing whatever they're doing, and you're also connected to the switch or the hub or whatever, and listening in on what they're doing, even as they're trying to send email out to the internet or visiting websites or whatever. We will talk about how you can deal with switches versus hubs. Encrypted data, you can sniff it, but you can't really see what's inside by virtue of the fact that it's encrypted. However, you can capture it and try to crack it. You can certainly see source and destination addresses and ports. You can see wireless SSIDs and initialization vectors for wireless networks. You can capture the beginning of a VPN handshake. Just like a WPA or WPA2, just capture the handshake and send it to an online cracker. For sniffing to work, you need to meet two conditions. Your sniffer is software or a dedicated hardware device that has a network interface that is in what we call promiscuous mode. Promiscuous means it is willing to pick up traffic destined for anybody, not just itself. The sniffer must be on the same network segment as the traffic in order to actually sniff that traffic. Now, we have to have a system or an application that turns our network interface card into promiscuous mode. Ordinarily, the way like Ethernet adapters work is that they have a MAC address, right? And as traffic is going by, they're looking at the destination MAC. If the destination MAC is for themselves, they pull the frame in. It's called a frame at that level, and you should know that from Network Plus. They pull the frame in and they pass it on up to the IP stack. If the destination MAC is not the same as your NIC, it ignores it and lets the packet just go by. In promiscuous mode, it just brings in everything, regardless of who it's destined for. Now, it's not like you've taken it and it doesn't get to the the actual recipient. What it is it's like listening in on somebody speaking. If you hear it, they hear it, everybody hears it. It's not like once you hear it, nobody else hears it. It's not like that. So we put the NIC in promiscuous mode. We listen to any transmitted data on that segment. We capture it and we decode the information. And we're constantly monitoring this network traffic. You can sniff passively, just sit there quietly, and only monitor packets. You don't send anything. But that only works on something like a hub. On a switch or an access point, you need to be a little bit more active. So if you want to sniff things on a switch, now we know this from Network Plus, switches will forward traffic only out certain ports. So you have to ARP poison the switch in order to get the switch to give you stuff that is not meant for you. And we can do it by MAC flooding, DNS poisoning, ARP poisoning, DHCP attacks, switch port stealing, spoofing attacks. There are a bunch of active sniffing attacks that we can engage in. What's vulnerable to sniffing? All of the clear text protocols. HTTP, IMAP, SMTP, Telnet, NNTP, RLogin, SMTP, POP, FTP. I mean, there's a whole list. Even SIP. Many of these have added encryption after the fact. The vulnerabilities include the fact that the data and the passwords are clear, or that we could capture keystrokes, or we could capture whole files. Sniffing works down at layer 2 of the OSI model, the data link layer. It works at the frame layer, like at Ethernet or at the Wi-Fi layer. Well, Ethernet's not a layer, Wi-Fi's not a layer, but down at layer 2 there. So we know that the OSI network layers operate independently, but we sniff at the data link layer. And as we're sniffing, the upper layers don't realize that we're sniffing, actually. A hardware protocol analyzer is a sniffer that's a piece of hardware that's meant specifically just to do this. It captures signals to monitor network usage. It won't alter any traffic. It identifies malicious traffic generated by hacking. It will grab data packets and decode and analyze the contents based on some rules. You can, with a protocol analyzer, you can view individual bytes of the data as each packet passes through the cable. Here are a number of protocol analyzers. Actually, Wireshark is not hardware-based, it's a software, but there are some hardware-based ones, including Keysight, Radcom, and Fluke. Here's an example of Wireshark. And this is just one example of a Wireshark capture. You can see that we have all these frames that are coming in. We can see that we have source and destination IP addresses that may or may not have been resolved to a DNS name. We can see the protocol that is in use and information about that. And then we can peel open the packet here. And we can get all the way down to the actual payload inside. Now, wiretapping is sort of the predecessor of sniffing. Wiretapping is mostly what we do against phone lines, although you can do it against internet connections as well. It goes back to the old law enforcement days when they would tap into your phone and listen. But attackers can do the same thing. You attach a listening device, and in those days it was just a phone with 2 clip leads, to a circuit, like a telephone circuit, and you would listen. You could monitor and access and intercept and record information. And you could actively inject something into the communication, or you could just simply monitor and listen and read, and just be passive. Eavesdropping is just any kind of listening in, whether it's wiretapping or sniffing or not. Eavesdropping is a larger term that means secretly listening to a private conversation or communication. It could be speech, could be telephones, it could be a sniffer on a network, it could be putting a camera or a microphone in a room, it could be capturing VoIP packets, voice over IP packets off a network and replaying them. You could use a phone to record somebody entering in a password or a PIN from across a room, so it's a sort of shoulder surfing, if you will. We could use a Wi-Fi pineapple or other man-in-the-middle devices to capture wireless traffic. We could use an IMSI catcher, man-in-the-middle device, to intercept cell phone calls, which law enforcement uses, but on the not-so-dark market, you can buy those yourself if you want. Just do a Google search. Of course, lawful interception, law enforcement will do legal interception of data communications between endpoints. They'll do legal surveillance, well, we hope it's legal, on regular phones, VoIP, data, or multi-service networks. Attackers, of course, are doing the same thing, but it's not lawful. So that's an overview of sniffing concepts.